Hey folks, John Cantera, the Double Broker Bounty Hunter here with a very special show for Stop the Scam. Now, one of the big issues going on in the industry right now is the latest rulemaking from FMCSA on broker transparency. This is something that's been really ripping across the internet and across stakeholder screens, and that's something that we are going to be talking about today. Most of our guests are here. A couple more, I'm sure, will be dropping in. We'll add them up as we can. But we're going to go ahead and get this party started. Welcome to Stop the Scam.
Welcome to the Double Broker Bounty Hunters Stop the Scam. Here are your hosts, the Double Broker Bounty Hunter, John Cantera, and Dispatch Caitlin Price.
Another one bites the dust.
I love it. I love it. I love it. It's been an absolutely crazy week. Normally, Kate and I do a little bit of banter at this point, but we have got a lot to cover today. So, Kate, jump in anytime you need to. But we need to go ahead and get into the fun. But before we do that, he is finally loading well. Glad Jimmy's with us because, Jimmy, here's your ad. You know, Jimmy is our sponsor, and here's what we have for Acubid Pro.
Do you know your cost per mile? Have you been hitting your profit margins? Do you struggle with bidding in a way that is both profitable and competitive? Would it be worth it to have all this information right in front of you? By calculating your cost per mile, Acubid Pro helps you stay profitable in an industry still struggling to recover. In order to calculate your cost per mile, Acubid Pro asks you questions about your business expenses. Our goal is to help you understand what you need to keep operating in order to keep up with the game and maintain your business. Enter your origin and destination, and we show you what you should bid based on your personal cost per mile in order to be profitable, even including a more detailed breakdown of each bid. Download the app today and get your 30-day free trial of Acubid Pro, available on the App Store and Google Play. Bid smarter, bid faster, bid better with Acubid Pro.
Okay, let's go ahead and go and quickly introduce our panel. As I mentioned before, we have our sponsor, Jimmy Durdun of Red Rocket Logistics and Acubid Pro. Thank you for joining us, Jimmy. Really do appreciate your help.
Thanks for having me.
We also have Bill Robinson of Wellington Group. Bill, always good to have you around as well.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And rounding out the broker corner is John Rogers from LDI. Welcome, John.
Glad to be here.
Okay, now in the opposing corner, weighing in at 80,000 pounds, we have the Carriers. Starting off the lineup is Jayme Anderson, otherwise known as Texas Trucker. How you doing, Jayme?
Doing all right, sir. How are you? Glad to be here. Let's get it on. I got my MMA gloves ready to go. Let's do it.
We also have Blake Foss with us. How you doing, Blake?
Good, thank you.
And last but not least, Aaron, the trucking guy, Moneypenny. How you doing, Aaron?
What's going on, guys?
And to help keep everyone straight and narrow, we have the world-famous armchair attorney, Matt Leffler. Matt, glad you can join us as well.
Thank you for having me on the program. I'm excited to talk about federal regulations. Nothing gets me more excited than talking about new and proposed federal rulemaking.
It is so wonderful, so wonderful. Now, all of us here are already aware of the current rule, but for those who do not know, here it is right here. And the one line that we are most concerned with is subparagraph C. Each party to a broker transaction has a right to review the records of the transaction required to be kept under these rules. That's 49 CFR 371.3. And as we all know, FMCSA has introduced rulemaking sponsored by SBTC and OOIDA to introduce some changes to these rules. So we're going to do a real quick summary for those who don't know what's going on. First off, one of the new things that requires brokers to maintain records in an electronic format. So it's not just having the paper records sitting in the office. Number two is to remove the distinction between a broker and non-broker charges to really mean any charge that a broker has to deal with, including anything that pertains to claims. The third change is it changes the verbiage from transparency being a right to a regulatory duty. I'm sure Matt's got some interesting thoughts about that one. And lastly, it requires brokers 48 hours to provide requested documents. Carrier requests. Now, as part of the all the stuff that FMCSA wants, of course, we have a comment period, and FMCSA is specifically asking 8 questions. And those questions are, what's the impact on rates and why? The second question is there a burden on the broker's end to make those records electronic? The third one is what time and cost goes into that conversion. Fourth being, is 48 hours a burden? And if so, then how much time is more reasonable? Fifth, will transparency reduce double brokering, drive out bad brokers, or increase revenue to carriers? That'll be an interesting question. I'd love to hear the carriers answer. For both freight brokers and household goods brokers, should they be subject to the same requirements under 371.3? And should requests be written or electronic? And how would you specify that should be demonstrated? The last question FMCSA wants to hear from the public on is, what electronic records make transparency more, or sorry, would electronic records make transparency more likely? Now, one of the reasons we're doing this is we want stakeholders who are going to make comments to make intelligent comments, which is why we've assembled the panel we have here today. So the format that everyone's agreed to is we're going to give the carriers their chance to say their piece. The brokers are going to ask a few questions to clarify the carrier's position, and then we're going to reverse those tables. And after each side has had their say, then Matt is going to come in and referee and tell us about the law, the implications, and intent, so that we all have a clear picture of what's going on. So for the audience who's watching, I will be throwing up comments throughout. Try to keep it clean, and we'll try to address those as we go on down the line. With that being said, Terry, I hand this over to you. Who wants to get us started in this discussion? What do you carriers want to see out of this? Jayme, you're probably the most outspoken. I'll let you go ahead and fire off. And you're muted, by the way.
Yeah, somebody had a lot of background noise. I was making sure it wasn't me, so I muted my mic. So transparency, it's been a long, hard fight for 2 years. I entered the fray almost 2 years ago. I mean, we know this has been going a lot longer than that. And we've been around and around, back and forth, had these meetings and spoken to everybody. And I mean, my stance and my view on transparency is transparency is going to mend the rift between the carriers and the brokers. I mean, the good brokers are going to come to the forefront, and the bad brokers are going to be identified, and that's going to give us the ability to, I feel, manage the market, be able to get that freight out of them bad brokers' hands, put them out of business, and get it over to the good brokers, which will benefit brokers and carriers. That's my stance. That's where I'm coming from. Personally, me, myself, I don't need 49 CFR 371.3. I've never been inclined to ask for it. That don't mean I don't feel like that if I wanted to, I don't have the right, because we got a regulation. What we know is they found ways to get around the regulations through waivers. And I don't see anybody doing that unless they thought there was a problem there. Me personally, compensation, I know my operational costs. I know what I need to run to be successful. And, I'm a patient carrier. I've been doing this a while. I key on hotspot freight. I do run the spot market only. So I'm not as interested in rates myself per se as I am to see how many hands this freight is going through co-brokered and how many cuts are being taken off of it before it hits the load board. We know what's happening. People say, oh, it don't happen like that, you know, if there's a co-brokered agreement. But to me, the transparency, what we know is that by rules and regulations, if it's a co-brokered load, they're already supposed to disclose that to all parties in the transaction. That's not happening. We don't know if a load's co-brokered. So here's my problem. So I've got certain brokers that I put on my DNU for actions that I consider unbecoming. Bad business is what I call it. And I don't work with them brokers. But without me being able to know the brokers involved in it, how can I assure myself that I'm still not working through those brokers as a proxy? To me, it's a problem. The cost, it'll be beneficial to other carriers, newer carriers, and there's people that do need that. They need to know what's in these lanes because they have no idea. The COVID era truckers that come in that was sold on the idea of it's the American dream. You can get rich by running a truck or two trucks. We need drivers. We need trucking companies jump in here. We're hurting out here, and now that they've done it in a boom cycle, they have no idea what's in these lanes because all they seen was COVID, and now they see the bottom. So they don't know there's a middle ground. The 48-hour compulsory enforcement, which I feel is what we need to keep carriers from being discriminated against for requesting the information. We've all seen it. We've seen carriers come up and different leaders in the industry come up and say, well, we'll just put you on the DNUs or a blacklist. That is discrimination. For asking for what is right or their duty. So it's a problem. So I don't know. I think eventually it might be a hard pill to swallow for brokers to be able to give up that information. But in the long run, I feel like it would benefit the industry as a whole. And that's my stance. Appreciate it.
Now you're muted, John.
So sorry about that. Aaron, the trucking guy. What do you got there, Aaron? What's your take on it?
My take on what transparency, regulation. I mean, how does this benefit a carrier? How does this benefit a broker? Is anybody going to adhere to it? I think the whole thing's a crock of crap, man. I don't think that I am a broker, have been, and I've been on both sides of the fence. The carrier really has no business knowing what I make at all. Transparency ain't going to help that. And just like you hear 90 of them say, the brokers are saying, if that, someone asks about transparency, you want to know what I make on the load, I'm just going to quit using you. Right. So that's kind of what's going to happen. Now, I've been a carrier, for 10 years, longer than I've been a broker, primarily working in the spot market. I would say 90 to, almost 100% of what I've done has been spot market stuff. We've had customers throughout the year, but that's been a very small portion of it because the customer's not stupid. And, I've talked to many people about this and they say, go get customers, go get customers, go get customers. That's easier for some and not so easy for others. And everybody acts like being a broker is so easy and that they're just, ripping off everybody left and right. They're not. Being a broker is much more difficult than being a carrier. There's a lot more moving pieces of being a carrier. But as far as actually getting up every day and cold calling and hitting phones and selling and putting on, a good outfit and walking into a shipper and getting to, rejected and dealing with that again and again and again, sales is the toughest job in the world, in my opinion, as far as dealing with it mentally in any industry that you're in. But from a carrier standpoint, you're never going to fix that void. I don't care what, legislation you pass, what regulations you pass. We don't need more regulation. Carriers need to be trained. And, I'm all about survival of the fittest. And basically, if you get in and you get booted out, you deserved it. There's going to be things that happen to you that maybe you got to learn to move with, with the punches and kind of, keep going and keep up and stay above water. But trucking has a very tiny percentage of profit. Your profit margin is very small, right? In some industries, if you go look it up, there's 20, 30% profit margins, right? Brokerages on, everybody thinks they're getting 50%. They're not. Customers are not that stupid. So that's a fallacy, right? They know what whenever they're hurting, customers say, I've got to go cut costs, right? Because there's only two ways to survive in any business. I don't care what industry you're in. That's to cut costs or increase revenue. And the spot in the middle is yours, right? So if you have a market like we just had post-COVID with this recession, revenue comes down. What do? You start cutting costs. So where is the first place that they can trim the fat quickly? Go straight to the shipping office and say, hey, everything just got cut. So if it either doesn't ship out or it goes cheaper or find cheaper carriers. Some customers don't do that because they, have a different base. I seen a guy the other day, just as a weird example in a completely different industry, but he's one of two people that make like 80% of the oak rifle stocks in the United States of America. So he makes like 80% of them. He has like 5 employees. He's probably been making those for, I think they said 60, 70 years. These dude's old, right? If you get into those type of lanes, you don't have to, deal with the market up and down. Your product is pretty typical. You're going to make the same price in, out, whatever, most of the time. Like Arizona Tea has never raised their cost on their product. And even though their costs have went up to make or ship the product, they've never raised it. And they've been able to survive for a long time. But to circle it back to freight, it's not going to change anything. It's not going to fix anything. You're always going to have brokers, or you're going to have a middleman in any industry. I don't care what it is. If you're in India, Dubai, you're in Africa, whatever, there's always going to be a guy who's a good hustler, just like this word that's buy low, sell high, right? And there's carriers are not going to go direct to shippers. They're just not going to do it because some of them aren't smart enough. They can't sell. They're uncomfortable. They're good with picking up a load, dropping off a load, but they don't know how to have business acumen, run a company, do all those things. The broker fills a void in that narrative, right? But the customers also don't want to deal with carriers because let's face it, we would have better truck stops and better amenities on the road if truckers didn't leave, crap bags in every parking lot they go in. So there's a dynamic of that individual that needs to be dealt with. And customers are also frustrated and pissed off and aggravated and don't want to deal with it. I just had a customer recently where I had a situation where a brokerage extended their line of credit. It was kind of weird. I made a video about it, but they went from 2 million to 2.5 million that month, and the factoring company put them on a do not fund list, basically, which freaked us out a little bit. But that customer went to that big broker, and they used to have load board access and stuff, but they got tired of dealing with the carriers and carriers wanting, certain things or whatever. And they didn't want to fulfill that, didn't know how, and the list goes on and on. So shippers don't want to deal with it. So they farm it out to a broker because that's an easy thing for them to do. The broker's willing to deal with it. So once that happens, he can name his price for the frustration, the logistics, the coordination, the liability, what have you, whatever you want to, throw it into a circle. And the carrier just basically has to deal with it. Now, what can a carrier do? A mom and pop shop moving forward into the new millennium, maybe not be able to survive. Maybe it's going to be the statistics will change from your 1 to 4 truck operations is 90% of the market. Maybe it'll be 10 to 20, 30 to 40, 100 to 500, something like that. That's a small organization that can compete, that can go get customers. And you can't hardly do it as a 1 truck operation anyway. But as a broker, you have more ability to say, hey, I've got 20 trucks. I've also got load board access. We're asset based. Maybe they really do have some trucks, whatever. So you have that aspect of it. A lot of shippers, they go get their own brokerage license and put up the bond so that they can go do their own thing on the load boards and stuff too. So I don't see that ever really happening. And I think it's kind of a fallacy that, if the carrier knows how much the broker is making, that somehow there's going to be this change in the industry, this change in the market. All they're going to do is say, whether I make $1,000 on the load and it's a $2,000 load, or I make $300, either way, it's none of your business. If you want to do my job, go do my job too, and go direct to the customer, right? And I get it. I mean, I'm a carrier, but I get it. And they're double brokering. There's things that you can do from a carrier perspective to I don't get double brokered. Okay. Maybe it's happened 3 to 5 times in my entire 10-year career of owning my own company. I've never worked for anybody else, right? But there's measures you can put in place to make sure that doesn't happen as a carrier. And you should put those measures in place. If you don't know how to put those measures in place, you should learn how to do that from a carrier's perspective. That's just my 2 cents, guys. But from a broker to a carrier, if you guys think that some regulation, something's going to change that, no, it's not. And I think it's a fallacy that some of these companies are making 50%. On some loads, if they go to like U-Ship and bid that for, $3,000 and give it to you for 15, you're the problem. If you take it for 15, just don't take it. Go somewhere else. Get a different load, and that stuff will sit. It does sit. If you look at the load boards, there's stuff on there all the time that's been sitting there for days, if not weeks, and it never gets moved, So that's how you fix that problem, in my opinion.
I appreciate that. Blake, you want to go ahead and chime in?
Sure, guys. Thanks. You would think, for as much as I talk about this and read about it all the time, I'd just be like gung-ho, ready to go here. Our industry has a lot of legs to it. Like the trucking guy just went over a bunch of examples of how things occur and how things work from both perspectives. And the key for transparency is to keep it simple. It's not about the cost of doing business for a broker. It is very important for a carrier to know their operating costs in order to operate efficiently. Transparency provides a complete paper trail. And for regulatory compliance in any business, a complete paper trail is key. Okay, for many reasons, for fairness, to prevent fraud, to hold people accountable. The existing regulation, when it's not enforced, has allowed brokers in the industry, not all brokers, because not all brokers are bad, those who wish to exploit the loopholes and take advantage of the industry and commit fraud is extremely easy for them to do with the loopholes that exist. So with the FMCSA, with this proposed change through the SBTC and OOIDA, I think that it aims to close those loopholes, to bring it more, what is the word? More current. So as opposed to when it was left in place 40 years ago, it doesn't really apply now correctly. There's too many loopholes to where they can commit fraud. They have not faced any enforcement, so there's no accountability. So if they want to perpetrate overreach, excessive price gouging, double brokering, because the FMCSA, no one is behind them going, hey guys, what's going on? They feel free to kind of like run rampant and take advantage of owner operators. Now, it's harder to take advantage of an owner operator who's been in the business a very long time because they're wise to the game when they see that happening. But like when COVID happened and all of these people came into the market, carriers too exploited loopholes, right? And they thought they were going to get rich quick. It's an easy way to make money, but they were taken advantage of as well. And it does prevent fraud, Sage, by completing the paper trail afterwards. Say you have a claim 6 months down the road and you're missing that part of the paperwork. What if that broker goes out of business or was a fraudulent broker and you need that paperwork to chase down the leads, to investigate, to facilitate claims, and that broker's long gone? What can you do? Well, you weren't provided transparency. And so how are you supposed to protect your business? I don't think it's about more regulation. I think it's about enforcing what's already there and closing the loopholes. And it's a federally regulated industry, right? And you have to deal with the regulations that are there. If you don't like the regulations, then maybe find a different industry to operate in. Like the brokers often tell carriers, and I'm very familiar with this because I own my own trucking company. The brokers say, you don't like it, you don't have to take it. Well, guys, guess what? If you don't like the regulations, then go someplace else.
Okay, some pointed words on the carrier's behalf. Brokers, do you have any questions to clarify anything that the carriers have been presenting? Anyone?
It's not really so
Well-
much questions as it is more interesting the way it is being presented. Trucking guy, of course, is taking a approach because clearly he does have a brokerage and a carrier senior from both sides. We know how passionate Jayme is about his and Blake's comments. I may take exception to a couple of them because of the fact that I'm not sure how you're looking to resolve fraud with a transparency on rating. On top of it, when we look at the fact that this rule was put in place to essentially create a constructive trust, we're talking about trying to put an obligation forward between when deregulation was taking place in 1980. A lot of people believe this was actually put in place to protect brokers and shippers. The reality is, it was maintained a detail of transactions, no question, Blake. It's also to be put in place to ensure the funds are distributed appropriately to the right carriers that do the work. So if I thought for 1 second, and maybe Matt and the other smarter people in this industry can figure this out, if I thought transparency would help stop fraud, sign me up tomorrow, please. But I don't know how that's going to prevent it. If anything, it may open up the industry to more fraud by making things more visible in certain cases. The other aspect, when people talk about loopholes and all these other things, the reality is there's nothing, as I'm sure Armchair and our legal sitting on here will talk to afterwards, and many lawyers have told me, there's nothing that stops me as a broker from saying I'm just not going to use your company. I reserve the right to who I do business with at any given time. You've brought up the FMCSA, which I've been writing about and been trying to work with for 2.5 years with people like Dale Prax and everybody else in this industry. The FMCSA is clearly broken. They cannot stop issuing 900 MC numbers to bad actors on a weekly basis. They can't administer the safety right now. They can't get the inspections done, 175,000 carriers without inspections as of 2 weeks ago, I believe I read. But yet we believe that the FMCSA is going to be able to enforce a rule from 44 years ago. It's, in fairness, I don't think that they've got any chance of administering this, even if they tried. It's no different than, I looked it up because I thought it'd be fun to say a couple of them. But in Ontario, Canada, there's a law still on the books right now from 50 some odd years ago. You can't have more than 3.5 inches of bath water in your tub. Who's going to enforce it? Never mind try and charge me for it. I think there are bigger concerns than transparency right now. And as I've said to Jayme, we've spoken on the phone. I've even replied to his comments because he's one of the most passionate bringing this subject up. You're welcome to come to our office and so is the FMCSA anytime they like, because even though I know that Jayme, Ken, and John Rogers, they are like 3 of the ones that like to all communicate on a daily basis. But Ken Adamo's not wrong. There will be cases where certain people, John Rogers, will post certain times, they have larger margins in certain cases, and John will speak to that. But as far as the numbers, when you look at it, I've been unfortunate, you can say, to work in 7 different brokerages, some of them very large, like billion-dollar brokers. I've never seen anything over 20% in any of them. Not one has ever exceeded that. And the averages are actually closer to 14.5%. Then you look at the fact that we've got, right now, the large public brokers. They showed the losses in the first quarter of $45 million on average. Their margins currently right now are sitting right at 14.5%. Now, granted, it's on billions of dollars. But that's where they're sitting with all the technology and everything else. So to me, I guess I'm looking at it from the standpoint, I'm just not sure at the end game what it's going to actually accomplish for carriers. Over to you, John. Sorry.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, I want to go ahead and let the brokers start with their piece, but I want to start with our sponsor, Jayme. You know, one of the comments that I heard earlier was about controlling your operating cost, and that's why I want to start with our sponsor here, because that's what Acubid Pro does. I won't run another commercial yet till the end, but Jayme, I want you to go ahead and start stating the case on behalf of the brokers.
Again, thanks for having me on. And I must say, we have a lot of nice beards here. I mean, you guys have done a great job with your beard game. Blake, you got to work on it. Sorry, but you got to work on it. No, I'll give you my take on this. And I fall right in the middle. I fall with the trucking guy and I fall with Mr. Bill. I don't see where paperwork fixes transparency whatsoever because the FMCSA is so broken. If the FMCSA could fix double brokering and transparency issues, it would have already been fixed. As far as the trucking guy goes, where does anyone have the right to tell me how much money I can make per profit? If you call me as a carrier and you choose to do a load for me at a set amount of money, if you underbid it, is that my fault? If I turn around and make 47% off of you because you didn't know how to do your job, should I say, hey, man, you should really charge me more, or should I take my 47%? And that's nobody's business. When I run out here to the store and buy a TV at Walmart, on the little sticker, does it say Samsung is making 87% on this TV? It doesn't say that. I just pay the price or I don't buy the TV. I mean, you've heard this a million times. If you bought a pair of Jordans, I guarantee you probably paid 200%, 300%, 400% markup. But yet you'll go buy these shoes. But but I'm supposed to report to you what I made and tell you what all's involved. So that then you can turn around if you want to and go get my customer. Because who's going to enforce the fact that you can't go poach my customer? No one's going to enforce that either. So it's a very thin line that we're walking on here. Is it fair to say I'm not going to use a carrier because he asked what I made? No. But at the same time, it's within my right. So now you're going to say, well, now I'm being prejudiced against them. Well, no, I'm protecting my interest. I mean, am I being prejudiced or am I protecting my business? I'm in business to be in business to make a profit. I'm not in business just to say I have a job. I mean, I can do that at Walmart. I can be the greeter at Walmart. So that's my take on it. I mean, it's a pretty simple, straightforward take, and I'll turn it back over to you, John.
Okay, Bill, I know you've already chimed in, but I want to give John Rogers a chance to go ahead and speak up. I know he's got some opinions here.
So look, guys, up until a few months ago, I didn't even realize this was a regulation. I'm just a one-man broker show here. But as I've said to Jayme, I don't care if I'm running 35.08% for the year. I just ran it while we're set. But part of that is part of that 35.0% in my business is there are 5 clients that I do business with where they do not have a logistics manager. So I'm that source. So I don't invoice them separately for that service. So they're saving $100,000 a year with benefits and things like that. And you don't have a right to that money. That's my money. That's for the services I do. Negotiation pickup allowances. Figuring out where something is. I mean, sometimes, Steve, one of my clients, will send me some new item that he gets, and it's in some cold storage, and I don't know where it is. I got to track it down. That's part of my job. So I've taken, he doesn't have to pay that logistics manager that $100K. So for me, look, I mean, I'd love to know what Samsung made or LG makes on their TVs. I'm sure it's high. Apple obviously makes good money. That's not the way of our economy. That's not the way our the founding of America works. But I mean, at the end of the day, and I'll go back to all the sentiments here is that which are the same, at least from our perspective. it's not going to fix it. I mean, I've been double brokered, I think 3 times, and those carriers never got a penny. Actually, one of them took me to court and lost. And so at the end of the day, for me, and I don't care, what I make. I just told everybody for the year I'm making 35.08%, and that's a lot of my clients putting trust in me and their business. And I have one client that I take care of 327 branches, 14,807 vehicles, and they don't have a logistics manager. They don't have anything. They just trust me to take care of it. So that company's probably saving a couple $100,000 a year plus benefits, 401k and health insurance and all those things by having me do their logistics. The branches just say, "Hey, John, I got to get this from A to B," and then I handle the rest of it. They don't have to go through a third-party logistics manager to make everything happen. So again, and I don't invoice it separately, like I said. So my business is a little bit different. I'm not an A to B broker. I'm more of a consultant who happens to move freight that happens to move. The value I bring is. But I'm with Bill. I'm with everybody here. Is there some bad actors in the industry? Absolutely. Dale Prox does a great job. I actually got to meet him at F3. I'm sorry I didn't get to see you, Matthew, but he's doing a really good job. I mean, if he can get this pushed through where it gets the attention of Congress, he'll make some real change, with his identification, profiling with the driver's license, and on the back end, I saw it. I saw a demo. It really works great. And all of this technology, it's the same people that vet people that whether you're going to get on an airplane today. It's the same stuff. So if it works for those people, if it works for airlines, it'll obviously work in trucking. Some of the things that some of these brokers do, I don't do. Where you got to stand by your truck and send a picture of your driver's license and any of that stuff. If I have to do that, it's not worth my time. I don't do that. And of course, I don't play in the spot market much, maybe 5%. I'm not a Rive Logistics that's got 300, 700, 3,000 loads a day being posted there, or C.H. Robinson with TQL. So there's a lot of this that I won't say. There's a lot of this that don't pertain to me because of the way I have my business structure. And the clients I go after, I say no a lot more. I say yes. And then I'll close with this. So once me and my clients agree on a price, whatever that price is, they could care less what I pay a carrier. And if you went to any of my customers and say, "Well, I found out, through this law that Mr. Rogers had to tell us that he charged you $2,000 and he only paid us $1,000," every one of my customers, and I don't mind telling them, you can call them all, they would say, "Wow, John's a hell of a negotiator because he does us a great job. He deserves every bit." That's what they would say because of what I do for them. I've never lost a load. I have never had one held hostage. Knock on some wood here. I've had 2 or 3 double brokered. One tried to sue me. None of them got paid. I'm relentless if you try to screw me. So I don't know what's the number here. Here, hold on, I'll tell you. Of the 8,724 loads I've done between truckload and LTL this year, that's a year-to-date number, I've got pretty good odds. So, but I'm with everybody that is this the wild, wild west out here? Absolutely, because I can't see that other carrier on the other. That's what I got to say.
Okay. I know we're getting really pressed for time, and I want to get Matt involved in the discussion here because Matt has a couple of questions for everyone. So we're going to start with that. And then Matt,
I've got some questions too, John.
Okay. Go ahead, Jayme. What do you got?
Yeah, I didn't get an opportunity there to question, but see, we got 4 brokers in here when I thought it was going to be 3 on 3. So we got 4 brokers. I'm glad I brought Blake's with me. That's not cool as far as I'm concerned, but it is what it is, right? So John, we got here's what I want y'all to look at. We got 4 brokers here. One of them saying he's making 35.08%. 0.08% on the year. TQL, one out of 2 times we got transparency enforced, they took 56% out of the load. So we're expected to believe all the hoopla, 14.5% on average. We're expected to just take this at face value without no proof other than the experts saying this is what it is, by the big publicly traded brokerages that are working in volume. So what we know is that your smaller carriers, just like your smaller brokerages, do not work in volume. Well, the brokers, I guess, do because they can move multiple loads at one time. I can move one load at a time. So I work on the quality of every load. So we have John saying he's got 35.08%, 1 out of 4 brokers in here right now. And my question is, should we just by blind faith believe what's being fed to us by the brokers?
Well, does it? I mean, that's my number. Somebody else's number could be 10. Somebody else's number could be 12. That's irrelevant. I can't go to Apple and say, Apple, what did you make? Well, actually, I could, because I mean, you could probably get a lot of data from publicly traded companies, obviously, Edibun, et cetera. But I can't go to any private company that makes anything and know what their margins are. Oh, actually, I got a good example. I eat breakfast with a guy who is the manager of the local Budweiser distribution center. It's wholesale price on a can of beer is 80 cents and a bottle is $1.25. Go to any bar and go to this bar right here, and I bet you I'll pay $4 for a bottle. They paid $1.25. They have a right to mark it up whatever the consumer will accept. If the consumer accepted, so it's kind of like me in trucking. If I have a load that's got to go, and $3 a mile, $2 a mile doesn't get it moved, I'll go to $2.10. I'll go to $2.20. I'll go to $2.30 until I find that sweet spot that gets the phone ringing and get the freight. I mean, that's just the way this business works.
So hang on a second, John. Because I'm not sure at the bar, and I know Jayme can't read it on his, but Matt does have more of a hard stop. Why don't we let Leffler and Armchair step in and make a couple of comments, then we can certainly answer or speak to these more afterwards. Because I know Jayme's thing is obviously what you may post and with other things. And I do have something else to share afterwards, agent versus Connie. So let's let Matt speak.
I appreciate that. I have twins that are 2 years old that are looking for dinner, and there's a time crunch. It's a supply chain crunch. Let me start off by saying thank you for letting me be a part of this, John. This is exciting to talk about regulations, both existing and proposed. Let me also start off with the history of this rulemaking. So let's talk about where this came from. In the yesteryear, the days before deregulation, this was an industry run by motor carriers. Unionized motor carriers moved everything you can imagine. In the 1980, about 60 to 70% of all truck drivers were unionized. Now, when the deregulation took place, there's an idea of these agents, these freight agents that would help the motor carrier find ways to get back to where they need to be. And that relationship was a single transaction. The freight broker would work with the motor carrier to find a shipper to get them home. That money would go from the shipper to the motor carrier. And it was the broker who said, how much did you get paid? Because you owe me a commission. That's where broker transparency first began. Now you fast forward today, 44 years later. And let me tell you something. The FMCSA, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, has a mandate. And that mandate is safety. 21.6% of all commercial vehicles on the road right now, if you inspected them, would fail. They're unsafe at any speed. That is because the FMCSA cannot do the single job that they are mandated to do. Now, we're looking back at this idea of broker transparency. Here is where we're really getting into the weeds. The existing rule, you correctly brought this up, John. You showed us what the obligation is, what the information is, how you request that. Part of this proposed rulemaking is to combat the way that brokers have actually tried to circumvent the regulation. So, for an example, you might say, I would like to see access to these broker transaction records. The broker would say, actually, you can come see them at our corporate office in Ohio. And you might say, I'm in Seattle. I can't make it there. Can you email it to me? No. That wasn't the requirement. The requirement was to make them available. Now, the real issue here, the big issue that we haven't spoken about, but I'm going to talk about it now because I'm a lawyer and I love talking about the law, is the actual goal of OOIDA and SBTC when it came to the proposed rulemaking, and that was to ban the use of waivers. Now, if you sit here, yeah, I love you, Jeff. I know my numbers. I know my statistics. I know how dangerous this industry is. Look, safely delivering freight on time and undamaged is difficult even under the best circumstances. It remains one of the most dangerous jobs in this country. Top 7 most dangerous jobs is operating a commercial vehicle. It's a very dangerous business. But here's the reality. The SBTC and OOIDA wanted to ban the use of waivers. What is a waiver? A waiver works like this. The broker and the shipper have a contract. That contract has whatever happens. The second contract, the second transaction is between the broker and the motor carrier. And there's a broker carrier agreement. In that agreement, 99% of the time, and if it's more than that, I would not be surprised. If it's less than that, I would be very surprised. People waive the right to those records. They waive the right to 371.3. That subsection C goes away. And there are brokers who say, if you don't agree to that, you will not work with me. And as the trucking guy also mentioned, there are brokers out there who, if you even ask them for those records, they will blacklist you. They will not work with you. So you have to really understand why you're asking for these records, because it is about your operating cost. You are going to move that freight safely regardless of how much money you get paid. And so you need to know how much it's going to take to get you moving those tires. But ultimately, the idea of the waiver is you in the contract, in that document, say, I will not have access to those records. Now, OOIDA and SBTC said, we want to ban that waiver. In the proposed rulemaking, the FMCSA clearly, unequivocally says, we are not going to address the waiver because it is our legal understanding that the only way we can stop a waiver is through an act of Congress. And we are not talking about an act of Congress. We are talking about a federal rulemaking procedure. Who told the brokers to add the waiver? Every lawyer who represents brokers. I mean, who told them? The lawyers did. Like, we know what our clients. So for those who don't know who I am, I didn't get a chance to introduce myself very well. I am the Armchair attorney. I'm an Illinois-based lawyer. I've been practicing since 2010. I've represented manufacturers. You call them shippers. I've represented motor carriers. I've represented brokerages. I represent the people in those institutions. So the fundamental question about the proposed rulemaking, which your comments are due before the end of January, I think it's January 21st, you should definitely comment, is what is the new change? The new change is a digital record produced in 48 hours of the request. That is essentially what the new rule is, unless you've waived it. And I'm telling you, motor carriers, if you think the federal government is coming here to save you, you are wrong. They will not save your business. Transparency will not make you profitable. It'll just be another exercise in contractual waivers. And that is exactly what the issue is. The FMCSA has clearly said they are not going to challenge the waiver unless you go through Congress. We have a changing administration. These proposed rules may or may not ultimately be modified or even just abandoned entirely. But again, there was a lot of traction to get this thing on the federal proposed rulemaking schedule. It is there now. There's a comment period. There's a couple hundred comments that are existing. But this is it. This is the only issue that matters. So many people have come to me and said, will this change come January or February, whenever this final rule gets announced? No, it won't. It'll change nothing. You waived the right, and you will continue to waive the right. And if you don't like how this works, know your costs. Negotiate your costs. There are products you can buy, whether it's green screens or data truck stop, that tell you how much you should be making. But ATRI puts out free research that helps you understand your cost. And this is the nature of our business. It's just the way that it is. So I hope that was helpful as a little bit of history and a little bit of like where we are today and then where the rule is going. But as long as we do not have an actual waiver provision, it doesn't change anything. And I also will say, I don't even think the FMCSA should be involved with this. They can't keep the trucks, trailers safe. They can't do the one thing that we ask them to do. The stuff. The last thing on my diatribe, I appreciate you letting me rant for a little bit, John. If you came to me and said, Matt, I would like to buy a gallon of milk from you, and I have 5 gallons of milk. I say, one of these gallons is unsafe. You would say, Matt, I do not want to buy any milk from you. And I would say, unfortunately, that's not your option because 1 in 5 commercial vehicles right now is unsafe at any speed. I rest my case.
Well,
Thank you, Counselor.
I promise there's one thing about him. He is certainly engaging and knowledgeable, and nobody's more excited when it comes to talking about regulations.
Hey, John, I got a question for Mr. Leffler there, if I can, please.
Lay it out,
Please,
everybody.
go ahead, Jayme.
So, Mr. Leffler, armchair attorney, I don't know how you want to be addressed, sir. I admire you, man. I watch all your posts, man. You're a good guy. We may disagree theoretically, but I know you're a good guy. I want to know how much research you've done into pre-deregulation, because you one thing you're putting out is wrong, because before deregulation, carriers could triple each carrier to carrier. So deregulation regulated the carriers. We no longer do that. It was known as double brokering, and obviously it's an accepted practice for brokers to pass freight back and forth co-broker. But if you look back in the history before deregulation, most of your carriers didn't concern themselves with a backhaul because the shippers was paying them round trip. You need to go back and do some research.
Yeah. So let me respond to that.
Picture of before deregulation.
Yeah,
Hold on. Let me continue on. Go ahead.
Oh, so my dad was a roadway guy back in 1976. In those days, 3 carriers moved everything in the country: Yellow, Roadway, and CF. And the way that those rates or those lanes were given was through government regulation. You could not actually be an owner-operator in that environment. There were some ways around that, but the vast majority of all freight moved through a highly regulated industry. The only way to grow your business was through inorganic. You had to buy people. That's why you look at Roadway and CF and Yellow over those 100 years they operated was through acquiring people. Now, why did the Motor Carrier Act get signed to begin with by Jimmy Carter in 1980? They believed correctly that they could reduce the cost of goods for Americans by $8 billion. That's billion with a B. And the way that they did that was dismantling the unions for the motor carriers, the material handlers, the mechanics, because that's how you pull out the savings. Labor remains the second or first largest cost for a motor carrier. And you're right, the shippers did pay a lot of the stuff to get people going back and forth, because in those days, there wasn't truckload and LTL. It was trucking. Yellow, Roadway, CF, they did all of it. And so when you deregulate the industry, the small fleets expanded. The independent contractor was probably the most innovative thing in all of our supply chain outside of containerization. The entire story of the American transportation system is, how do I pull cost out of doing this incredibly hard work? We offshore all the manufacturing. And so we distribute it throughout the United States. And the way we do that is through the small motor carriers. And so the brokers that exist today could not exist without small motor carriers, because the big motor carriers don't need brokers the way that small motor carriers do. I think one of the interesting things to keep an eye on is 20 years ago, 6% of all freight was moved by brokers. Today, it's 20 to 25% are moved by brokers. That is the growth of the brokerage industry and the growth of the independent contractors. If you think this industry you're in is to put drivers against brokers, you're wrong. It's against us, the American consumers, who demand cheaper stuff faster and faster and faster. We're addicted to this stuff, and that you're not going to change anything by making transparency. All you're going to do is make another regulation that people are going to waive. And unless we have the waiver go away, it doesn't change anything. Where did he go?
So Matt, I would add.
I'm not sure. Jayme dropped off. That wasn't my doing, I promise.
What I would add to your comment, though, Matt, is the consumer is one aspect of it. But the reality, like I've been trying to say to all the carriers I deal with, and remember, we own 125 trucks in Canada and 35 in Wisconsin. So we're also a carrier. But when you look at it from this standpoint, the shipper is who we all work for in commonality. They're the one that control what we want, which is freight. They control the money that we're all after. The more we come together as carriers and brokers, the faster we can address lower rates, the faster we can educate each other on what we both do and how we both work commonality to the shipper. That is the common goal. And most of the time, the shipper sits in control, and they are the supply. We are, they're the demand, we're the supply. It's very rare that you get a COVID. And I understand every time a carrier that I reach out and say, where was your transparency in COVID? You raised my rate 400% overnight. Where did you get the justification? How can you show me or justify that cost? That's when supply and demand comes up through COVID, and even last week when I posted it. Now, with this transparency they're latching on to, they believe that the supply and demand can go away. They just want to deal with the transparency. But as a carrier, I know one thing. If I don't work with the brokers and the shippers and the right manager, I'm not going to get their freight. I'm not going to secure their freight. So we work on both sides of the fence because we do have assets and we're a broker. But at the end of the day, even though I know what my cost is being $205 a mile to run our trucks, I can't pay $205 a mile if everything in the data in the lane tells me it's running at 180 as a broker. And then if a carrier comes and gives me that rate for 170, I can say, well, hang on, I'm going to pay you 180 because that's what the lane rate pays. But I certainly can't turn around and say I'm going to pay you 210, 220. My shipper will not pay you that rate. That's the difference. We need to come together to that common.
One of the interesting things I always think about when it comes to like the rate transparency and just rates generally is we move freight below the operational cost of a motor carrier. Now, there's a lot of reasons we might do that, but this is that idea of deferred maintenance and what happens. And we're not talking about nuclear verdicts or insurance premiums and all that, but I think about that all the time. But this is the reality. Is we have a very tenuous grip on the safety of our equipment, and broker transparency, I think, is just the way we get distracted from the broader issue, which is we have under-maintained, underinsured motor vehicles hauling all of our stuff. And we just kind of say, well, that's the way it's supposed to be. And like, we need a radical transformation in this industry. It's not going to be through a regulation that mandates you to disclose how much money the shipper paid you. Blake had a question, and I got to go in a minute. What's up, Blake?
I do. Thank you so much. So a couple of things. Somebody said, like, how is it going to help? How is it going to help the industry? When a business knows that they're going to be held accountable, they are less likely to act unprofessional. They're less likely to commit fraud. They are less likely to do the things that they're not supposed to do, as opposed to the complete opposite. Okay. When you know that you're going to get away with stuff, what's to stop you? If you have somebody actually imposing enforcement upon you, like DOT with truckers, even though they're way far behind and not doing their job, they could do it more efficiently. The truckers are less likely to run their truck through a scale when they know they're going to get caught, just like a broker is going to be less likely to act unprofessionally if they're held more accountable. And unfortunately, we're not in the retail store industry, right? We're not a retail stores. It's the supply chain. The supply chain is a protected industry, and that's why it's federally regulated. The actions in one sector have a ripple effect into the other sectors. When the integrity of the supply chain is compromised, the country is compromised, right?
I tell you, Blake, so, I mean, is the argument that you think that if we require brokers to disclose how much money they made from a shipper, we will have a safer supply chain, even assuming the fact that the waiver is not going anywhere? So like, this is the part that I have in the argument from the side of people saying we need transparency, knowing full well that waiver is not going anywhere. That is not accurate. That is an inaccurate statement that you said, because it will not change anything fundamentally. The things that will fundamentally change this industry, make it safer, is to raise the minimum insurance rates from $750,000 established in 1980 to an actual number that would cover the catastrophic accidents that take place. I understand the idea that supply chain is incredibly important. We need to understand how this stuff works. But I do think that if you say that safety is tied to transparency, that is inaccurate. That is not a true statement. Hours of service violations, vehicle maintenance, that is what really drives safety in this business.
It is absolutely tied to safety because crap rolls downhill. Okay. The carrier's at the bottom, right? The shipper's at the top, you've got your broker, and then your carriers, and it rolls downhill. if the carriers and the brokers are not asking enough from the shippers, the carrier is struggling at the bottom to maintain safe equipment on the road because they cannot afford to make money.
Even when motor carriers were
That
making
is-
money hand over fist, the safety ratings and out of service were the exact same. The International Road Check data is completely clear on this. For the last 5 years minimum, 22% of all vehicles were placed out of service unsafe at any speed. We don't
2021 it was 2021 it was 18%.
I
From
compared
a
the last
carrier
2
standpoint,
years, and
that
half-
number, I have, let me talk. From a carrier standpoint, because I can go at him for this. I can do it. I can help my own, all right? The carrier standpoint that I have, what you're talking about, unsafe, okay? Out of service for so many reasons does not deem that equipment is unsafe going on the road. There is a book this thick that is not even provided by the government. Okay, they outsource that to a company that they deem, okay, this company puts together some regs, we'll just use those, because the government doesn't want to say, hey, just like with the FDA or anything else, that's not an arm of the government. That is an outside company that they use because their government doesn't want to assume liability for putting in these regs, right? But there's a lot of things that can deem a vehicle unsafe that is not tires, brakes, driver, things like that you guys would think. Some of that bullshit is straight BS. Okay, it really is. It's too much regulation on the carrier. Okay, so and to go at Blake,
can I put something in here for a second? Because I'm finna have to roll. I got 143 miles of deadhead to get into position for my load in the morning. I got to have a 10-hour break. So I got just a minute. Let me put in a comment to this, and I'll listen to y'all while I'm rolling, please. And I want to ask a question of our host, because this also affects them as professional dispatchers. So if I'm a carrier, I've got things that is required for me to do, but I've also got a family. I got to support. I've got bills I've got to pay. I've got things that I've got to meet, or I don't have an authority and I'm out of business. And then where am I at? So the only cut that can really be made out here, the only major cut that you can do is cut maintenance, which affects safety if the money's not there. Now, that being said, I want to go to our host, and they have expertise in this too. Kate and John are both professional dispatchers. I've worked with them both in the past. They know I'm a dispatcher as well. Been doing it for some years, and I'm pretty good at what I do. Obviously, I'm in business still, right? I get good rates. So that 205 a mile, I won't move my truck for less than $3 miles. I just won't do it. That's a fact. That's a fact. So I want to ask John and Kate and let them throw their 2 cents in, because they got their expertise in this. So as professional dispatchers, when we look at the regulation, the regulation is any party in the load. How would that affect the professional dispatchers such as yourself if you was included in that chain and you got the transparency and you seen the percentage that the broker took, and then the next time you go back to that broker for another carrier or the same carrier, would you negotiate rates the same? That's a question.
no,
Thank you.
it doesn't matter because somebody's still going to move it cheaper.
Hold on. That was it, John and Kate. Let me
poke in. Let me poke in, because I've been wanting to say something for like freaking 25 minutes. So
go ahead, Kate.
So this isn't even directly maybe it is related to transparency. I don't know. But when I think about this whole issue, my thing being on the carrier side most of the time, obviously I have to talk to the broker and I have to try to negotiate things with them and whatever. A situation that happened today happens all the time, and this is my issue. I call in on a load, and this is a huge broker. This is a very large broker, has their own factoring company, blah, blah, blah. This isn't a small guy. I call in to the average broker to ask about a load. I ask them they're trying to move it for 1,000. I say, well, I need at least 1,200. Can you get me 1,200? They go and talk to their account manager. They come back. Hey, yeah, we can do that. Let's do it. All right, cool. We're already set up. He's like, I'll send you the paperwork. We'll get everything rolling. All right, cool. So I'm waiting for my paperwork, waiting for my rate con. And he, yep, she's right. But anyways, I'm waiting for my paperwork, my rate con. The guy calls me back and says, hey, I'm really sorry. I know we just agreed to that, but someone just called in right after you, and we'll do it for $100 less. so I have to give it to that guy. Okay, is that really the safest thing to do? Then we got into, we're talking about safety and all that shit. Is that really the safest thing to do? Is that guy that's willing to run his truck for less than what he probably needs, is that the safest thing to do? But every broker
Kate, how do you know that, Kate? His truck might be paid for. His insurance might be like Dan Rowe, who pays $800 a month.
Oh, yeah, I'm not saying that that's like hands down what happened, but there are a lot of people in the industry that run under what they need because they came in during COVID when things were all crazy high and everything was good, and they're struggling. Now they're struggling. Now they're just
that's what Acubid Pro's for, Kate. They should know their cost per mile and not move for under their cost per mile.
I agree, but my guy's cost per mile was, had to meet 1,200, and they come in and, well, somebody just underbid you right after that. Okay, how many times is that somebody that probably isn't worth a shit and doesn't know what they're doing? I'm not saying that happens.
It's kind of like a house negotiation. If you go to buy a house, and 7 people show up, they're going to start taking bids. Why? Because the broker selling the house makes more percentage on the profit. It's really no different. I'm not saying it's right.
They are capped. They are capped.
The same.
I think what Kate, you're talking.
Well, no. Sorry. Hold on. He said they're capped.
No, they're not.
They're not capped. The 6% escalates with the price of the house. So if the house was selling for $425,
and hang on,
I come in and hold on.
Do they provide transparency?
No.
6%. You just said it's capped. The point of the story is Kate said she would take it for 12 and got undercut by 100. If you come bid on my house at 425 and then John Cantera comes in behind you and says 430, and I'm going to take the 430 because I make more. The broker wants me to take
that's a totally different game. You're not talking about
the broker wants me to take 430. The broker wants me to take 430 because she also makes more.
Right, but that's different. You say bye to your house, and that's all fine. That's
not different. It's the same.
This is still somebody's material and somebody's stuff that needs to get from point A to point B that they own, that they are paying is more safe. So,
Kate, I think your example is more.
I don't really see the justification for like that kind of argument. I get the point, but I don't really see fully the justification for that one.
But Kate, I think you're talking about an ethics versus a transparency thing. On top of it, to Jimmy's point, which I think is very valid, if you look at it, when you're sitting there, so I can tell you what it costs to run our trucks. I can't tell you what it costs to run the trucking guy's trucks. I can't tell you what it costs to run Jayme's truck. I can tell you when they ask me what they're going to ask for a rate and everything else, when they tell me what that rate is, I can tell when I take that across the miles whether it's going to work for my customer or not, whether they're going to accept and purchase that freight. If not, then the reality is I can't dictate the cost. I just seen Jimmy's software in commercial for the first time. I didn't see it the last time I was with John. There's, in addition to what Jimmy's doing, you can also get the beauty of it. It's Freight Validate has a free software for owner operators for you to check MC numbers, and you can also check their credit. So there's a lot of tools built for carriers to allow them to make sure they're dealing with the better brokers. But the main thing that we're talking about that as a carrier we have to remember at the end of the day is we determine what our cost is based on everything we have coming at us.
Right.
If we're going to sell for less than our cost because the market dictates so, that's not the broker or shipper's fault anymore.
Basically, at the end of the day, guys, I want to come back and address the thing that she's talking about is ethics, right? And being ethical. And then also Blake talking about fraud, right? The sad truth of this is if we want to talk about regulation, guys, we got to talk about it in a completely different aspect because Matt's gone. I wanted to get a big, Joker type of laugh. But after he told me about this, relinquishing your rights, that made me almost laugh my ass off because as a broker, I'm putting that in everything now. And if you think from a dispatching standpoint, because I've dispatched hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of trucks, did it for many years, including my own trucks, but you will not get that load. And from me, and I won't be able to get loads from a dispatcher or as a carrier from other astute brokers who are smart enough to put that in there. They're going to say, you want the load? Sign here. I'm never going to tell you what I'm getting paid. And if you ever find out that's a breach of contract, that made me laugh because I'm putting it in mine, right? And if you think that these brokers, King of Freight, TQL, whoever you're working for, you guys are saying like TQL, CH Robinson, some of these guys, don't work for them. You know, their business model is like Wolf of Wall Street. Put a bunch of frat guys or people into an office, hype them up, and sell, smile and dial, get that shit as cheap as possible. If you're a carrier, if you're a dispatcher trying to work on behalf of carriers, stay away from that stuff. You know, I don't work for them because I'll book a load and negotiate it up $500-600 because I'm a good negotiator. I'm a good at my job. And also I can negotiate on skills. If you look up my MC, and I've been in business 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, I have 1,000 loads I've done with you that's really good. When they look at that, like, oh shit, yeah, he's going to be able to negotiate up $500, $600, $800, $1,000 in that range. Because I know what it's going to take. And I can say, look, man, that whole I'm only making $50 as the broker is BS. Okay. And that's funny. Everybody's only making $50. That's why brokerages are worth billions of dollars. I always lead with that. Right. So you have to get to the point and realize that when it comes to this type of thing, there's nothing you can do about it. There's always going to be somebody who will do it cheaper. And that's just the world. That's life. That's the industry. Okay. So if we want to talk about regulation, what we got to talk about is how do we get these actors that come in here that have 5 dudes sitting in a truck that is running that thing back to back to back to back to back, and they're not sleeping. Okay. You want to talk about it, and who's on the behalf fighting for bringing them people over and buying up all the visas and buying up all that stuff? That's your primes. That's your TQLs. That's your CH Robinsons that are also running company trucks as carriers. Let's not forget that, guys. So we're piss ants on here with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10. I've been as big as 65 trucks doing almost $10 million a year, right? As a small guy, I own the company, right? I'm not working with a big team. I don't work for somebody else. So I get the point that even at 60 trucks, you're a nobody. You're a nobody, right? You can't compete with these guys that have 5,000 trucks, 500 trucks, right? You want to talk about regulation? Let's talk about insurance. But as far as, you know, and safety and the safety score and the whole safer, how that's a scam, right? And can put a guy out of business, and there's no repercussions to help us get out of that, right? But transparency is a joke because let's flip the script from a broker standpoint. You're a carrier, you call me and I say, I can't give you this load till you tell me what your cost is, and you got to be transparent with me. How much money do you make? What's your profit margin on a load? How many loads do you do? How big are you? I can't give you this load because you don't have 5 trucks. I can't give you this load because your cost is $2 a mile and this load's $1.80. Doesn't make no sense. So I don't go to the next guy. You know, now we're getting into la la land and funny business, right? But when we talk about fraud, you're like, it's going to prevent fraud. The fraud that happens in transportation, guys, and this is for everybody here and anybody that can watch it, is an unprosecutable crime. Until they find ways to stop it, I can sit butt naked in Costa Rica by the pool on my laptop, ding, 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 and double broker all day long. And I'm smart enough that I could go do it. Now, I'm not an unethical person and I don't want to do that, but I could make millions doing that. And nobody's ever going to come find me. Nobody's ever going to come look for me. Nobody's ever going to come get me. So how do you stop that? Right? That's the question. You want to talk about
that's a different show because we need another hour for that one. But
we've done that before.
Yeah. The one thing
and we'll do it again, I'm sure.
I think we will. But the one thing I will say about this, the one thing that Jayme at least has started that I know I've seen brought to my attention. The one thing about this discussion, you've got people like Sheemy, you've got Dale Prack, you've got Jeff, the Cowboy. You've got all of us, at least at this point, you've got us all talking about it. You've got us all reading about it. But again, there's Dale there. But at the end of the day, when you look at it, the one thing when it comes down to is I think the carriers have to understand and go through certain aspects of things. Get Jimmy's software. Get at least to a position where you have a mentor in this business teaching you what the costs are. And at that point, sometimes you have to be more firm. If we're going to get rates to go up, stop selling the cheap ones. To the trucking guy, I wish I knew your first name. Apologies, but
Aaron.
So Aaron, you've made some very, very valid comments today. And one of the things when it comes down to it, fraud runs rampant because the FMCSA is broken right now. until we can fix the MC numbers and the
Well,
insurance.
I would like to see an idea on what they could do. What could they do to prevent some of the fraud? What could the FMCSA do? I don't think they know what they could do. I don't even know what they could do to stop it.
Well, I'll tell you what,
Again, that's topic for another time. Well,
right.
Try to stick this. We need to wrap up.
When it comes down to it, John can get Dale on here, and you'll see the facial recognition. Some of the things they're talking about doing, they may not happen as fast as we want them to happen, but at least they're talking in the right direction. Dispatch services. Listen, you know what? Anybody that knows me, including John, knows that I'm against dispatch services. I'm a broker. We pay the rules. We pay the licenses. Same as a carrier. Not once in this entire call has one carrier ever looked at it and said, what does it cost a broker to operate? You know, what about the $3.5 billion we invested in technology to service what the customer is really looking for, to attract them to come work with us? What about the fact that we have large shippers with 90 and 120-day terms that a carrier couldn't survive on, that we're paying in order to do that? The fact that the good brokers are the sales arm for the trucking industries, especially the OOIDAs. Yes, the TWIC cards are coming as well. So when we look at it right now, the reality though is we need to work together as partners in the same industry to raise and increase our rates and to make sure that we start to stay pat when the next time the down market, hopefully the up market is coming at the end of next quarter, in the end of first quarter in 2025. But once it does, we've got to get rid of the bad actors that lowball rates, that put freight out there for no good reason at all, and get rid of the lowballers. In the meantime, I apologize again because it's almost 7:30 and I still got to drive home. So I'm going to have to say goodbye, but I've really enjoyed Blake, first time meeting. Kate, always a pleasure. Same with you, John. Aaron, nice to meet you. And Jimmy, I think what you're doing is great as well. And I hope that it gets the success and the recognition it should, and carriers use it to the best of their degree.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Bill.
I want to take a moment. Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. And for those who had to drop out, I do apologize. I know we were running a little bit long. I do want to go ahead and at least give Texas Trucker the courtesy of an answer from me. If I find out a broker was making a lot of money on a load, and the next time I go to talk to that broker, am I going to try to negotiate up? It depends on the circumstance. If it's the same lane, maybe. If it's not the same lane, it may be a totally different customer. There may be a totally different dynamic involved. It's all going to depend on what the cost per mile is for my client and how I represent them and what their needs are. Every load to me as a dispatcher is an entirely new ballgame, whether I've spoken with that broker in the past or not. And I treat each load completely differently. So that's just how I personally deal with that. So, Jayme, I don't want you to sit there and say that I didn't answer your question. So I hope you were able to listen to that.
I'd like to throw up a question for the panel here, guys. So, and maybe this one, because Blake's more carry you guys dispatch, but what is transparency really going to do? I'll give you an example. Let's say you have, I'm going to pick whatever, a beer client, right? And that client ships beer and you got it through a broker, right? And you found out, you got your transparency, Blake and whoever else, right? You got your transparency. It's a $2,000 load. It comes over $1,000. You went and shipped it and you found out after shipping it through transparency, it pays $2,000. You call up beer shipper, whatever, Budweiser, and say, hey, I see that this load's paying $2,000. We don't want to haul it for that. We don't want the broker. We want to cut them out, whatever. I want more money. And they say, go back to the broker. Let's say it's John, right? And you go back to John and say, hey, I see you're getting $2,000. I want $1,500. I want $1,800. I don't want you to make all the money. And he goes, click, right? And goes to the next person. Okay. I'll give you an example because something like that happened to me. I got into a route where we were doing a lot of business and I got courted. They said, come, in with us direct through like a United Rentals type of thing, but it was a big contract. And they said, hey, we meet the guy. I think we're getting in direct. And the funny thing is that broker that we were getting it through already, that I was already good friends with, had been doing it a year or so. He had been with them for like 25 years. Okay. So when I said, hey, we want to go direct, that was going direct. You're going to their logistics guy who has been handling it for 25 years. They're not going to go with anybody else. So when I ask for transparency and he hands me, he says, no problem, here you go. and hands me the sheet and it says that I'm getting 1,000 and he's getting 2 or whatever the hell it is, I have no course of action at that point. I'm just out of it. So he's going to say, you want to haul it or not? I really don't care. I'm not even mad that you want to know what I get paid. I don't really give a shit if you know or not. I'm not going anywhere. Right. And you call John the chipper and you say, hey, this is bullshit. You're giving it to him for $2,000 and I'm getting $1,000. He's getting $1,000. And they say, yeah, that sucks. Good luck. Call him back. Click. And they don't care. They literally don't care. You know why? Because he's been there 25 years. He's been their guy. So even though he's got a brokerage that they've been able to separate liability from, he has his business, they have their business, but they work in conjunction as a team. There's nothing you're going to do to stop that. There's no preventing that. There's no way to get through to that, right? So, there's just nothing you can do. So my question is what is transparency going to change in a situation like that? What is it going to do for us?
That is only going to provide a carrier, a business owner, the knowledge of that lane or of that load. And he will be able, or they will be able to make that decision for themselves. Hey, this isn't a profitable load for me. This isn't a profitable person for me to do business with. I can then choose to do business with somebody else or keep doing it or not.
And my side of that would be the fact of if you don't feel like it's profitable to begin with, you shouldn't be doing it anyway. Transparency does not change because it's a 48-hour gap. Transparency does not change how much you should bid on this freight in that moment. Now, maybe the next time it changes, but in this exact moment, I'm right here. I'm Johnny Hotshot, one guy truck. Today, I need to get from here to there. I don't have time to fix tomorrow. So it all starts with bid correctly the first time at the rate you feel like you're worth. If as a truck owner, I know the average operating cost is $205 to $215. So why in the world would I ever be under $215? Or I need to set myself a goal of making 10, 15, 20% profit. And that's where I start. I can't come in here if more independent guys, because independent guys make up the mass majority of DOT-MC numbers. We all know this. Small business, 1 to 4 trucks, 1 to 10 trucks. Small businesses run the United States. If they would go in and quit having this cheap freight argument and stop moving that freight, that's how you're going to change this whole industry. If it sits long enough, freight prices have to change.
Right. But my thing is that'll never happen. And the failure rate is like 89% in the first year. I'm a consultant. I do this for a living, right?
Oh, yeah.
And in restaurants, if you open a restaurant, statistically, 6 months is your lifeline. You're out of it in 6 months. In trucking, it's the first year is 89%. You're out of the business. And this is not a popular stance that people are going to say that I have. But at the end of the day, it's natural selection, survival of the fittest. If you jump into any business, I don't care if you have vending machines, a car dealership, lawn care, whatever, and you go out of business because you can't market, you can't get customers, you don't know your cost, you over leverage your equipment and stuff, and you didn't buy it cheap. Maybe some guys out here buying a truck. I know a guy actually that I've had on my podcast that buys trucks for $5,000-6,000, completely does everything, rubber, liquid, everything on them, tire, brakes, bearings, all in-house. It's ugly. And it's not the most popular truck, no emission systems, but he has total 10-15 grand in his trucks, and they run right next to 2025s that are $200,000. You can't compete with that guy. He can go get a load for $2 a mile, $1.80 a mile, and be profitable at that with the same margin that you would need $3 a mile. He don't need 3, he needs 2. And you get 3, have the same margin. He gets 2, has the same margin. So you have to know your cost, or you deserve to go out of business. I'm sorry, but that's it. If you can't make your profit work, your margin work, your cost work, and get up every day and go out there and beat the bushes, then guess what? Get up early, go to bed later. Survival of the fittest. And if you can't do it, go out of business, and you deserve it. You deserve it because you're not tough enough. And to say that it'll be fair, I hate the word fair. I absolutely hate it. I'm sorry, but I do. Life isn't fair. It really isn't. And trucking is one of the most brutal industries. I'm telling you what, the stuff that goes on, the fraud, the truck stuff in the truck stops, the scams, they're ripping tires off trucks and truck stops. They're breaking in right now all over Illinois, Chicago, and stealing ECMs because they're worth like 13 grand. And these guys these are not like dipshits that are just breaking windows and going in. These guys have the ECM out of your truck in like 60 seconds. Okay, so they know where it's at. They're skilled, trained, and they know where to sell them. And so, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that we have going on, and it just gets worse. I don't even know how you would fix all that stuff. But broker transparency is like the least of our problems. I'm telling you right now, because I don't give a shit what a broker makes. Jimmy, you call me to give me a load, and I know I can make $1 on it. You make $10 on it. I don't give a shit. You know what I mean?
I'm with you. Everything has an operating cost. Even me as a brokerage, I still have expenses. Now, like I said, if you call me and you underbid a load, is it my fault for taking it? I don't think it's my fault. If you didn't bid it correctly and I made more money, not my fault. Yeah. Now, Acubid Pro, it sounds contradictory. I built Acubid Pro for owner-operators to defend themselves. You can't call the broker and let him shortchange you. If the math doesn't work, don't move the load. Move on. Call the next guy.
Yep.
I mean, don't shortchange yourself.
With the Texas trucker, I feel his struggle, man, because I'm telling you, I went from like 65 trucks down to 5. And I'm telling you right now, trucking's tough. And everybody that I've consulted with, almost all of my friends have went bankrupt. I'm still standing. I'm still rolling with the punches. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you're still standing and make it into the next cycle and make it into next year, whew, you need you a trophy. I'm telling you right now, you need you a trophy because the shit ain't easy out here. And I've been doing this shit, over 10 years. I came out, I made it through Obama. I made it through, the next one. I made it through Trump. I made it through this. I've made it through all of it, right? But at the end of the day, it is tough because the margin is so small. Look at the big companies that are public. They're on their carrier side. They're like 7% margin. I've been doing owner operators and stuff and have my own trucks. And I don't care if you have an owner truck, you own the truck, or you have an owner operator. You can't hardly get a 10% margin in this business, a profit margin.
Blake, I'm going to give you the final word, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap this thing up.
I'm going to read something from a carrier packet that I have in a lot of them, like 90% of them. And one of the things I'd like to point out is why a waiver is not needed or required in a carrier packet to waive the 371.3. It says, carrier agrees that broker's compensation hereunder for its services is confidential and need not be disclosed to any other party. Carrier further agrees that it will not reveal to anyone the terms of this agreement, the pricing of transportation services, or any other detail of the business conducted between carrier and broker, nor regarding the operations of broker's customers. Carrier and broker further agree that all documents, forms, rate sheets, bills of lading, reports, memoranda, drawings, specifications, photographs, and other tangible information provided by broker to carrier shall remain confidential and shall not be shared with third parties or used for other transactions and remain the valuable property of the broker. With that language in a carrier packet, there is no need to further require a carrier to waive 371.3.
I'm putting it in mine though.
But
okay, folks.
Like it's not needed because you're already held. A carrier is already held to that standard.
That's an interesting point. I want to go ahead and we'll start wrapping it up there. Before we do, I do need to go ahead with another ad for Acubid Pro.
Do you know your cost per mile? Have you been hitting your profit margins? Do you struggle with bidding in a way that is both profitable and competitive? Would it be worth it to have all this information right in front of you? By calculating your cost per mile, Acubid Pro helps you stay profitable in an industry still struggling to recover. In order to calculate your cost per mile, Acubid Pro asks you questions about your business expenses. Our goal is to help you understand what you need to keep operating in order to keep up with the game and maintain your business. Enter your origin and destination, and we show you what you should bid based on your personal cost per mile in order to be profitable, even including a more detailed breakdown of each bid. Download the app today and get your 30-day free trial of Acubid Pro, available on the App Store and Google Play. Bid smarter, bid faster, bid better with Acubid Pro.
I would like to go ahead and thank our sponsor, Acubid Pro, and Jayme Durdun for providing this show and helping us out. We would also like to thank all the guests who were with us today. I know this is a very charged topic. I'm sure this is going to be discussed over and over again. I already know of at least several response videos that are going to be recorded tomorrow based on what was said here. So it's going to be interesting to see how all this plays out. For those who do wish to go ahead and make comments on the FMCSA ruling, this is the website you need to go to. The docket number is FMCSA 2023-0257. And as Mr. Leffler pointed out before, the deadline for responses is January 21st of 2025. So if you are going to issue a response, please make sure you do so there. Remember, Stop the Scam is live every Monday, 5 p.m. Central on all the Lounge Media Group's social media outlets. Please like and subscribe so that you can stay in touch with all the things that we put out. If you ever wind up underneath what you think is a fraudulent load, you can always get a hold of Kate at kprice@rockdovefs.com or myself, the Double Broker Bounty Hunter, at jcantera@vigilanttransport.com. Again, special thanks to all of those who were able to be out here today and to comment. We hope to see you guys next week. We are, I believe we have Axel Live going to be on next week. So it's going to be kind of interesting. Folks, whatever you do, stay safe out there, and whatever, don't let scammers take you for a ride. We'll see y'all next week.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.